I was never supposed to fall for my best friend's older brother, but it happened one summer and it wrecked everything I thought I knew about myself. His name was Connor, and before that summer, he was just a background figure in my life, someone I only saw in passing when I was over at Jamie's house. He was 2 years older, always busy with work, or his girlfriend or whatever older brothers did. We weren't close. Hell, we barely spoke. But then Jamie left for a 3-week vacation with his family, and I stayed behind in town, working my lifeguard job and trying to scrape together enough for my fall tuition. I thought I'd have the place to myself, quiet evenings, bad microwave meals, and long nights with Netflix. Then Connor moved back home for the summer. He showed up on a Tuesday, 2 days after Jamie left. I came by the house to grab a hoodie I'd left, and there he was, shirtless, barefoot, standing in the kitchen drinking orange juice straight from the carton. "Hey," he said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "You're Jamie's friend, right?" I nodded, trying not to let my eyes linger too long on his chest. "Yeah, I left my hoodie here. Thought the place was empty." He shrugged, leaning against the counter like he belonged to the room. "Moved back in yesterday. Work fell through, and my lease ended. So, here I am." I tried to play it cool, say something casual, but I couldn't think straight with him looking at me like that, head tilted, mouth curved in a lazy, knowing smile. "Grab your hoodie," he said, waving toward the living room, "unless you want to stick around for breakfast." I should have left. But I didn't. That morning turned into lunch. Lunch turned into beers on the porch. Before I knew it, I was spending every other day at Jamie's house, even though Jamie wasn't there. Connor would be there instead, sometimes shirtless from a run, sometimes in sweatpants that rode just low enough to mess with my head. We started talking. About everything. About nothing. And little by little, the distance I'd always felt between us dissolved. It was easy with him. Too easy. The shift happened so slowly I almost didn't notice. One night, we were watching some dumb action movie, sitting too close on the couch. I blamed the beers. He blamed the cold. But then his thigh pressed against mine and stayed there, and I didn't move. Neither did he. That's when things started to get blurry. The thing about Connor was, he knew exactly what he was doing. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe he was just that confident, that comfortable in his skin, that it felt like he was always in control, even when things were quietly unraveling between us. That night on the couch was the start. He didn't pull away, and neither did I. His legs stayed against mine the whole movie, and once or twice he shifted, closer, not away. Every time his shoulder brushed mine, or our elbows touched on the armrest, I told myself it was nothing. Just space, just proximity. But the moment the credits rolled, and he turned his head to look at me with that slow, almost amused expression, I felt the heat in my stomach coil into something dangerous. "You falling asleep on me?" he asked. His voice was low, teasing. I shook my head, not trusting myself to say anything. I couldn't look away from him. "You've been quiet. Just tired." I lied. My voice sounded a little rough, like I'd swallowed gravel. He nodded slowly, still watching me. Then, without warning, he reached over and brushed something off my shoulder. A phantom speck of lint, maybe. His fingers were warm, and they lingered just a second too long on my shirt before falling away. "All right," he said, standing up and stretching. His t-shirt lifted enough to show a flash of his stomach, a hard line of muscle disappearing into the waistband of his sweats. "I'm gonna shower." I nodded again, still not saying a word, and watched him disappear down the hall. The sound of water running echoed faintly through the walls. I sat there on the couch, staring at the TV screen that had gone black, my heart thudding a little too loudly. I told myself to go home, to leave now, before whatever this was went somewhere I couldn't walk back from. But I stayed. The next few days passed in a blur. I kept coming over, kept finding excuses to hang out. At first, it felt like we were just filling time. Two bored guys killing hours with video games, cheap takeout, and late-night beers. But there were moments that felt loaded, heavy with something unspoken, like when he leaned over me to grab a controller, and his chest brushed my shoulder. Or when we watched a movie again, and he dropped his feet into my lap without asking, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't move them. Then, one night, He asked if I wanted to crash on the couch instead of heading home. "It's late," he said, already halfway down the hall. "No point in driving." I hesitated. "You sure?" "Yeah," he called back. "Jamie used to sleep over all the time. You know where the blankets are." The couch was lumpy, the air conditioner rattled all night, and I barely slept. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the sound of the shower, the way he looked at me, the fact that every time I let myself believe I was imagining things, he'd do something that made me question everything. The next morning, I found him in the kitchen, shirtless again, pouring coffee with that same quiet confidence. He didn't mention the night before, just handed me a mug and said, "You snore." "I don't," I muttered, taking a sip. "You're making that up." He just grinned. "Maybe." Then he bumped my shoulder with his as he walked past. And it wasn't playful. It wasn't accidental. It was something else. I was drowning in it, whatever it was. But everything came to a head the night of the storm. The storm hit out of nowhere. 1 minute it was humid and still, the sky a flat gray sheet above the neighborhood. The next, wind whipped through the trees like it was trying to tear the world apart, and thunder cracked loud enough to make me flinch. Rain slammed down hard, thick and relentless, rattling against the windows like fists. I was already at Connor's by then. We'd ordered pizza, and were halfway through a horror movie neither of us was really watching. The power flickered once, then died completely, plunging the house into darkness lit only by the occasional flash of lightning. "Shit," Connor muttered, standing up. "You good?" "Yeah." I stood too, setting my drink down, trying to sound normal, calm, like the power outage didn't just send my pulse into overdrive. He grabbed a flashlight from the drawer by the sink and clicked it on, casting a warm beam of light across the kitchen. His face glowed in it, sharp cheekbones, a slight stubble on his jaw, eyes unreadable. "Looks like we're roughing it," he said, half smiling. "You want to light some candles, or?" "Sure." We moved around the house like we'd done it 100 times, lighting thick pillar candles from the drawers Jamie's mom probably hadn't cleaned out since Christmas. The flickering light threw shadows everywhere, making the living room feel warmer. Intimate. We ended up back on the couch, closer than usual. Maybe it was the storm. Maybe it was the dark. Maybe it was just time. Connor had changed into dry clothes, a hoodie and shorts, and his hair was still damp from the rain that hit when he stepped out to check the fuse box. He looked comfortable, relaxed, but his leg was pressed against mine again, and he wasn't moving. "Think it'll be out all night?" I asked, just to fill the silence. "Probably. Welcome to our third world power grid." I laughed, and he looked over at me. Really looked, and I could feel something in his stare, like he was trying to decide something important. Then he said, "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah. What's up?" He leaned back a little, his eyes still on me. "Are you into me?" The question hit like a slap. I didn't breathe, didn't move, just sat there, heart hammering, while his words hung between us like a live wire. "What?" Connor didn't look away. "You heard me." I felt heat crawl up my neck into my face. "Why would you ask that?" He shrugged, but it wasn't casual. "Not really. Just the way you look at me sometimes. The way you don't move when I sit close. It's not a bad thing. I just want to know." I could have lied. I thought about it. But something in the way he looked at me, steady and real, made the truth spill out of me before I could stop it. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I am." He didn't say anything at first, just nodded like he'd expected it, like he'd known all along. Then he said, "Okay." "Okay? Yeah." He shifted, just slightly, and now his thigh was against mine, his hand resting casually on his knee. I just wanted to be sure. Sure of what? His eyes flicked to mine. That I wasn't making it up. The air between us felt different, thicker, slower, electric. And even with the storm pounding outside, everything inside felt quiet. Still, I didn't move. I couldn't. Then Connor reached over and placed his hand on my knee, not forceful, not even suggestive, just present, steady. And somehow, that was worse, or better. I couldn't tell. My whole body went tight with awareness. "I don't know what I'm doing," he said softly, looking down at his hand, "but I haven't been able to stop thinking about it." I stared at him. "About what?" He looked up, met my eyes. "You." It would have been easier if he'd kissed me, if he'd leaned in, closed the space between us, and made the decision so I didn't have to. But he didn't. He just sat there, his hand on my knee, his eyes on mine, like he was daring me to make the next move. I didn't. Not right away. Because this was Connor, my best friend's older brother. The guy who used to give me rides home from practice and never said more than a handful of words. The guy the first was never supposed to think about like this, let alone touch. But his hand was still there, and he wasn't pulling it away. And I could feel his thumb brushing gently over the denim of my jeans, barely noticeable, like a nervous tick. "I've been trying to figure it out," he said finally, his voice quieter now. "What this is, what I'm doing, why I keep finding reasons to hang out with you, even though Jamie's not here." He swallowed hard, and for the first time since I had met him, he looked unsure, like he was walking blind into something he didn't quite understand. "I thought maybe I was just bored, or lonely, but it's not that, it's you." His words cracked something open in me. "I've had feelings for you for a while," I said. My voice was hoarse, almost a whisper. "I just never thought you'd notice, or that you'd care." Connor's jaw tightened. I didn't think I'd care either. The power was still out, the only light in the room coming from the candles flickering on the coffee table and the occasional burst of lightning outside. The air felt heavy, like the whole house was holding its breath along with us. "What do we do now?" I asked, barely getting the words out. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he slowly leaned back into the couch, his hand slipping off my knee and dropping to his lap. The absence of his touch made my skin ache. "I don't know," he said finally, "but I know I don't want to pretend like nothing's happening." He ran a hand through his damp hair, sighing. "This is probably a terrible idea, but I keep thinking about you, about how you look when you're half asleep on this couch, or when you're laughing at your phone like I'm not even in the room." His voice dropped lower. "I've never noticed that stuff before. Not with anyone. Not like this." I didn't realize I was leaning in until our shoulders touched again. He turned his head, and now we were close. Closer than we'd ever been. "Is this real?" I asked. He looked at me, and in the flickering candlelight, his expression was raw. "Feels real to me." So I kissed him. It wasn't planned. It wasn't smooth or dramatic. It was just real. A quiet, breathless press of lips that felt more like a question than an answer. And when he kissed me back, slow and careful like he didn't want to mess it up, I felt everything shift. He pulled away first, just enough to look me in the eye. "Still feel real?" "Yeah," I said. "More than anything." He smiled, small and crooked. "Okay." And then he kissed me again. Deeper this time. Like we weren't just testing the water anymore, like we'd already jumped in. We didn't talk much after that second kiss. It wasn't some cinematic rush to the bedroom or clothes hitting the floor. We just sat there, close, touching without thinking. His hand on my thigh, my fingers tracing the hem of his hoodie, like I was afraid he'd disappear if I stopped. The storm outside had softened to a low, constant rain, and the house was quiet except for our breathing. Every now and then, I'd catch Connor staring at me, like he was trying to memorize the moment, like he wasn't sure it was really happening. "I didn't expect this," he said after a while, his voice low. "I didn't even know I wanted this." I nodded, not sure how to respond. Because I had wanted this, for longer than I cared to admit, but I never let myself think about it seriously. Not like this, not with him, not with it being mutual. "What does this mean?" I asked quietly, afraid of the answer. He leaned back into the couch, his head tipping against the cushions. "I don't know. I'm not trying to mess you up or play games. I'm just figuring it out as I go." "And Jamie?" I asked, because it was the unspoken thing sitting between us like a loaded gun on the table. Connor's jaw clenched, and for the first time since we kissed, he looked nervous. I haven't even thought about what I'd say to him. He's my best friend. I know. We sat in silence again, but it wasn't awkward. It was real. Like we both knew we were on the edge of something we couldn't name yet. Something we weren't ready for but couldn't stop. Eventually, he nudged my arm. "Stay the night." It wasn't a question. I nodded and he stood up, offering me his hand. When I took it, he didn't let go, just led me down the hallway like we'd done this 100 times before. His room was warm, quiet, the air heavy with the scent of laundry and something distinctly him. Cologne, maybe, or the faint trace of body wash. He didn't turn on the light. Just pulled back the covers and slid in, patting the spot beside him. I hesitated only a second before climbing in. We didn't do anything. Not really. Just lay there facing each other under the covers, barely a foot of space between us. "I haven't done this before," he said after a while. "With a guy." I swallowed. "Me either. Not like this." He reached out and laced our fingers together between us. "Feels kinda dangerous," I nodded. "Feels kind of perfect." He smiled in the dark. "That too." I fell asleep to the sound of his breathing. Our hands still linked under the covers, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. But nothing stays perfect forever. Not when real life comes knocking. The next morning was too bright. Sunlight streamed in through the half-open blinds, catching the dust in the air and the edge of the comforter thrown across my waist. I blinked, momentarily confused by where I was, until I turned my head and saw Connor lying next to me. He was on his back, one arm over his eyes, the other resting close to mine on the bed. And just like that, it all came rushing back. The storm, the couch, the kiss. His hand in mine, that look in his eyes when he said, "It felt real." I wanted to stay in that moment. Just breathe it in and let it sit for a while. But Connor stirred, rubbed his face, and glanced over at me with sleep in his eyes. Hey," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He stretched, bones cracking in his shoulders, and sat up slowly. "You sleep okay?" "Yeah, you?" He nodded, then ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking older. Tired. He didn't smile this time, just stared down at the sheets like he was already somewhere else. "You all right?" I asked. He hesitated. "Yeah, I don't know what today looks like." I knew what he meant. Last night had been quiet and safe, wrapped in the noise of a thunderstorm and the soft shield of candlelight. But morning was harsh, bright, real. Morning meant decisions. It meant reality. Jamie was coming back in a few days. We didn't talk about that, not yet. Instead, we got up, dressed in silence, and made coffee in the kitchen like we were just two roommates who happened to share space. Not two guys who'd kissed each other breathless the night before. Connor poured me a mug, handed it over without looking me in the eye. "You got work today?" "Yeah, noon shift," he nodded. "Right, cool." It was awkward. Not bad, but weird. Like we both wanted to say something, and neither of us could figure out how to start. Then, as I pulled on my hoodie by the door, he said, "Last night wasn't just a thing. For me." I turned. He was standing in the kitchen doorway, mug in hand, finally meeting my gaze again. "I just wanted you to know that." "I know," I said. "Me neither." He gave me a small nod, like it was all he could manage. "All right. Cool. Text me later?" "Yeah, I will." But I didn't. Not that day, not the next. I wanted to. My finger hovered over his name in my messages, more times than I could count. But something held me back. The fear, maybe. The not knowing. The weight of everything that could go wrong. On the third day, Jamie came back. And everything changed. I got the text around 3 p.m. on a Friday. "Jamie, just got back. You around tonight? Thinking beers and Mario Kart like old times." I stared at it for a long moment, heart thudding in my chest. I hadn't seen Connor since that morning after the storm. We hadn't texted, we hadn't called. It wasn't because I didn't want to. It was because I didn't know how to go back into that house and pretend like everything was normal. And now, Jamie was home. I replied with something casual. "Yeah, I'm down. What time?" "Jamie, come by around 8. You're still practically family, man." That word family hit different now. I almost didn't go. I thought about making up an excuse, pretending I had to work late or had plans. But something about avoiding it felt worse. Cowardly. So I went. I stood outside their house for a good 5 minutes before knocking. The porch light was on, and I could already hear laughter inside. I told myself it was fine, that this was just a regular hangout, that Connor wouldn't even be there. I was wrong. Jamie answered the door, grinning like he hadn't just been gone for a month. He pulled me into a half hug, clapping me on the back like old times. "Dude, I miss this place," he said, stepping aside to let me in. Everything still smells like Connor's stupid protein powder, though. That name, spoken so casually, made my stomach tighten. As I stepped into the living room, I saw him. Connor was on the couch, legs stretched out, beer in hand, dressed in a black t-shirt and joggers. He looked up when I walked in, and for a moment, our eyes locked. There was no smile, no nod, just a flicker of something I couldn't read before he looked away and took a sip of his drink. Whatever I was expecting, it wasn't that. Jamie didn't notice. He was already grabbing another controller, flopping down on the other end of the couch. I sat in the middle. The night played out like some strange version of a memory. Laughter, trash talk, cheap beer, and the constant sound of the game in the background. Jamie was his usual self. Loud, sarcastic, throwing popcorn and laughing when he won. But Connor was quieter than usual. He played. He laughed a little, but he didn't look at me again. Not really. And I didn't know what to do with that. At one point, Jamie got a call and wandered off into the kitchen, still laughing into his phone. And then it was just us, me and Connor. I kept my eyes on the TV, but I could feel him watching me. "You didn't text," he said, barely above a whisper. I glanced at him. I didn't know what to say. He nodded slowly, like that answer didn't surprise him. "Yeah, me neither." We sat in silence for a beat, the sound of the game looping on the screen. "I've been thinking about that night," he said. "Me too." He looked down at his hands, fingers tightening around the beer bottle. I wasn't messing around. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't confused. "I know. I don't know how to be this out loud. Not with Jamie. Not with anyone." That hit me in the chest. I wanted to reach out, to say something reassuring, but I couldn't. Not with Jamie 10 feet away, laughing in the next room. "Do you regret it?" I asked quietly. "No," he said instantly, then softer. "But I'm scared of what comes next." I nodded. "Me too." Then Jamie walked back in, oblivious, phone still in hand, and the moment snapped in half like a dry twig underfoot. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I don't remember who won the games, or how many beers we drank. All I could think about was the space between me and Connor, the words we didn't say, the way we both seemed to flinch when our fingers brushed on the controller. By the time I left, it was past midnight. Jamie walked me to the door. "Good seeing you, man. Don't be a stranger." "Yeah," I said. "You too." He slapped my shoulder. "And hey, thanks for hanging out with Connor while I was gone. I know he's kind of a lone wolf these days." I froze for a half second. "Yeah," I said. "No problem." I walked to my car with that weird pressure in my chest, that ache of wanting something that suddenly felt very far away. As I got in and shut the door, my phone buzzed. "Connor, come back, just for a minute." I stared at it. Then I turned the key in the ignition and sat there in the dark, engine humming, heart in my throat, trying to decide if going back was the right thing, or the thing that would break everything. I didn't move right away. Connor's message sat on my screen, glowing faintly in the dark interior of my car. I read it again. Come back. Just for a minute. The rational part of me said don't. That this was too messy, too soon, too many things left unsaid. But the part of me that still remembered the way his hand felt on my chest in the dark. How steady his breathing was next to mine. How different everything felt when he said, "It's real." That part of me was already reaching for the door handle. I went back. The house was quiet when I stepped onto the porch. Jamie's bedroom light was off. He must have crashed hard after the beer and the games. I knocked lightly, not sure what I was expecting. The door creaked open before I finished the second knock. Connor stood there in a t-shirt and boxers, his hair messy, his eyes tired. Neither of us spoke. He stepped aside, wordlessly, and I walked in. The living room was dim, still smelling faintly of popcorn and cologne. We didn't sit this time. We just stood there, a couple feet apart, neither sure how to start. "I thought you weren't going to come," he said quietly. "I wasn't sure I should." He nodded slowly. "But you did." "Yeah." He looked down at the floor, then back up at me. "This thing, whatever it is, I don't want it to be some secret we carry like a weight." "Then what do you want it to be?" His eyes met mine. "Something we figure out. Together." It wasn't a grand declaration. It wasn't dramatic. But it was honest. The kind of honesty that made my chest ache. "I don't want to hide either," I said. "But I'm scared. About Jamie. About what this means." He stepped closer, his voice low. "Me too. But I haven't stopped thinking about you since that night. I keep wondering what would have happened if you'd touched me back, if we didn't stop, if I'd kissed you before the storm even hit." "You can now," I said. That stopped him. He looked at me, like he was trying to decide if I meant it. Then his hand came up, slow, tentative, brushing the side of my face like he was still testing the idea that this was real. When he kissed me, it was soft, careful, but it didn't stay that way. It deepened. His fingers tangled in my shirt, mine in the hem of his, and suddenly, we weren't just kissing, we were falling. The night moved in pulses after that. Clothes rustling, quiet breaths, the heat of skin on skin. Nothing rushed, nothing reckless. Just two people finally giving in to what they'd been avoiding for weeks. And when we were lying in his bed later, limbs tangled, heart slowing down, he whispered, "I don't want to go back to pretending." "You don't have to," I said. "Not with me." He smiled against my shoulder. "Then we start here, one step at a time." We didn't have all the answers. We didn't know what we'd say to Jamie or how the world outside that bedroom would react. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't scared of the questions. Because I wasn't alone in them. Connor was real. This thing between us was real. And for now, that was enough.